Okay, so Reece Hogan is the author of Butterfly Nebula, which is the winner of the Backwaters Prize in Poetry, Litany of Flights, winner of the Paraclete Poetry Prize, the chapbook O Garden Dweller, and the nonfiction spiritual theology book I Live, No Longer I. She is one of 10 poets featured in the anthology In a Strange Land and serves on the board of Red Hen Press. Her poems have appeared in Sugar House Review, Scientific American, I actually don't know how you say this out loud, Rhino, Rhino, America, Connecticut, River Review, Amsterdam Review, Eco Theo Review, Verse Daily, and elsewhere. She is a Pushcart Prize and Best of the Net nominee, and she has a BA from Rice University in Houston, Texas, a JD from the University of California, Los Angeles School of Law, and an MA in Theology from St. John's Seminary in Camarillo, California. And okay. And for my part, I am just in awe of what Laura crafts in her writing. She twists together her varied experience as a lawyer, theologian, creative writer, and just a human being into poems that so vibrantly reveal layers of truth and meaning. In her poems, she manages to find God in both the strange and ordinary, in space and stars and the sea and human suffering. And I love what she said in a recent interview with of Poets and Poetry. She said, "I love to play with evolving meanings within a line or within the poem, especially when the poem is working through layers to arrive at a new shifted perspective." And I left my experience with her work just that, with a new shifted perspective, and more able to see connections between seemingly unrelated things in my own personal search to know God. So please join me in welcoming Laura Reece Hogan, and we're excited to hear from her.
Thank you for that beautiful prayer and that amazing introduction, Kate. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here with all of you today. So excited to be at BYU. So the title of this reading is From Backyard to Cosmos, and I'll read poems from two full-length poetry collections, and you might even guess from the covers which is a little more backyard and which is a little more cosmos, but they both have elements of both. So I'll start with Litany of Flights. In the poems in Litany of Flights often explore nature and contemplate the human condition and the spiritual journey. The book is interested in what we see, what we don't see, and how we come to see. So I'll read a few poems from Litany of Flights. This is on the efficacy of a prophet. The ocean hushes and hums in my blood. The moon takes up more of my eyes each night, swelling sliver of revelation that turns and hides. What I want to know is whether those luminous tendrils break the surface. Why so fractional, this iridescence? She brims and brims, but cannot overflow. What I suspect is this: the moon is a sibyl, whispers what she does not fathom. She dresses in stolen silk. She glides and foreshadows and slides away at first hint of the eclipsing dazzle. What I see glaringly: the sea rushes with every spray of blue, green gleam of glass, break of cobalt, bitter brine. The waters draw breath from the sun, yet the moon holds her tidal sway. Globes of pearl take on the shimmer, waters pile high for her. What I hear in the deep: she is royal messenger, gentle ray, and what she speaks bends the burn. What she beams flickers plunder, the little words of the sun I can bear. So this next poem takes its title from the wadi, or the little brook, where Elijah the prophet hid after proclaiming a 2-year drought. And God sent him there to the brook, to Cherith, for the water, and the ravens fed him. So where I live in Southern California, we really had a many-year drought. And this poem was written when we were really in the thick of that drought. This is Cherith. Before you sent me down to the wadi, there was that goldfinch, shining. Swaying, it lingered, warbled, flew away, away, away to the blue mountain, each beat of wing a stop in my heart. Stay, stay, stay. The shadow of your bird in me shifted. My love slipped the green and lilac banks of the river, beyond rushes and the reaches of my throat. Then those days wheeled on the track, puffing, mechanical and drawn, 1,000 tongues choked on salt, not bread. I turned into a pillar, looking for your warm yellow breast. A drought later, I forgot to remember how you had taken yourself away from me. My reshaped heart steadied, bundles and branches worn into grooves, patience uncounted. Is that why you sent me down to Cherith, to hide me in your hands, to drink of the stream and cool, deep swallows? Sometimes I am afraid to touch the beauty of the emerald mossy stones. They make me ache with riparian joy. Your goldfinches alight, feed me presence and song, and it is for this your finest wheat I have longed. So the title, Litany of Flights, I started realizing a lot of the poems I was writing for this book did have some connection with flight, and birds were one of them. So, of course, the goldfinches were in the last poem, and in this poem, we have hawks. So where I live in Southern California, there are a lot of red-tailed hawks, and they love to gather over the freeway in these big spirals called kettles, and kind of group together. They catch the thermals off the freeway. So it's a sight you occasionally see over the freeway. So that image inspired this poem, along with one of my favorite scripture passages from Luke, in which Jesus tells Martha, "Martha, Martha, you are anxious and worried about many things. There is need for only one thing." This is transmission. Red-tailed vortex of air spiraling above the freeway, shimmering heat of 1,000 valley vehicles pulsing a signal. Midday thermal currents invite a dozen wheeling hawks. A kettle organizes like a ladder of angels, a summons to float freely, immersed in the higher home. My longing, a grounded bird, thrashes against the metal and traffic, but they rest on wings of another for a little, soar on the flow, talons and beaks above and below on tongues of exhaust. They glory round the cell tower, disguised as a too-emerald, too-stiff palm. They ring the blue finger of God. The transmission requires a path. My displaced breath of words, the updraft, a wrestling reach sunward, carried high and higher. The warmth, the movement, the center builds, a wafting whole, a transient channel, permeable gyre of connectivity, a sky road even wingless eye could take. Open the roof, give my eyes to the dazzle, repeat like a mantra, like Dorothy in Oz, like Mary of Bethany, repeat the need for only one thing. So now I will read some poems from Butterfly Nebula. This came out from the University of Nebraska Press last October, so this is actually its book birthday. And it's really interested in intersections of the physical universe, the human being, and the divine. And in it, you'll find poems from the bottom of the ocean to the furthest reaches of outer space. So I'm starting in the bottom of the ocean. The first poem I'll read involves a siphonophore, which is a really long colonized sea creature. Think really long sea snake. This is heart as siphonophore. The researchers had imagined it whipsawing through silty sleeves, the giant siphonophore, sea worm, of such ghostly fiber and length, it would take hours to watch it pass, the writhing blue bioluminescent skin of it simultaneously here and far. Now they witness it, photograph it, stare at the improbable, slithering 150-foot figment, ribboning in a quantum state, the floating bell of head so distant from the end of its colonized chambers that the steadiness steers far from the fret. Stingers jostle in the eerie suck and ripple of its path. Now, praia dubia, leap and swim forward with sureness. Now wind sideways in uncertain fatigue. The head arrives in an Australian oceanic canyon, while the tail trails in a different time zone. So far from true cadence of itself, two places at once. There, the water glows aqua in your presence. And here, the long, thin muscle still heaving, reaching along the night-drenched bottom. So in the course of writing this book, Butterfly Nebula, I became a little obsessed with nebulae. A nebula is a giant cloud of dust and gas in outer space, and new stars form in it. It's a star nursery. But it also comes about often through a supernova, which is the death of a star. So for me, a nebula came to represent this kind of nexus of life and death, or deconstruction and reconstruction, or simply change. There are thousands of classified nebulae in the universe, and I wrote a lot of nebula poems, but I chose just 12 for this book to kind of go along the narrative journey of the book. And I'm going to read one to you now. One of the themes in the book is metamorphosis or resurrection, which you'll hear in this next poem, which is the title poem, Butterfly Nebula. A stellar death must herald it. The hottest star throws off its envelope. Torres of dust, eaten and wretched all its life. Two violent jets of gases over 36,000 degrees Fahrenheit must rip across space, many heavy light years out from under tightened belt of the body, dark slit running through the waist, a disk of weight, a thumb of the divine pinches the butterfly almost to severing. The thing about a resurrection, the chrysalis must cleave, expel the life blood, damp crushed wings, at first unrecognizable. The Magdalene looked in all the wrong places. She thought he was the gardener. The split apart vowels of her name uttered unfold across constellation, stretching stream of ultraviolet radiation, making cast-off skin of the dead star glow into arching nebular lobes, its new form still gathering energy. So when I was a kid, I lived on Kwajalein Island, which is in the Marshall Islands in Micronesia. And at the time I lived there, it was a U.S. Trust territory and a missile range. They were literally firing ballistic missiles off the island, and I, being a kid, had no idea what was going on. This is playing with tiger sharks on the missile range. We were shrewd on an adventure like Huck Finn. She was 6, I was 8. We set out to hike the entire boomerang of the island. We took peanut butter sandwiches in a purple bandana, flip-flopped to the rocks at ocean's edge. My sister and I knew our matching denim with stars had superpowers, like Wonder Woman, so we climbed, our spindly legs slipping. We knew the glistening indigo spikes of the sea urchin, the orange and blue splotched coral, the dark manta shadow. Knew the sea held shell-encrusted Treasure Island chests of gold. How thrilled we were to spot the shiny fin of a little tiger shark. A friend, like Baloo, Bagheera, the striped body undulating in the clear Micronesian water, so close we could almost touch it. Then another. We were captivated that they followed us, impressed by our daring plan, wanting to play. If we'd seen a flash of light, say, over nearby Bikini, an immense boiling mushroom over the sea, we would have looked for Alice's caterpillar. So, as I mentioned, this book is intersections of the physical universe, the individual, and the divine. And some of these poems are addressed directly to the divine. This next poem was sparked by the new moon, which of course has the appearance of there being no moon at all. That image put me in mind of the via negativa, or the negative way, which asserts that the transcendent God is beyond human knowledge. So the idea is that even as we can enter into closer and closer relationship with God, we approach an unknowing and darkness. This is via negativa, new moon. Why do I want the moon, which belongs to you? Why do I drive against the foothills like a maniac to moon hunt when it's gone missing? I don't understand what's happening to my physics. I might need to live in a tent for a month, away from streetlights and other blazes. I might need a blade, need to cut my hair and nails to slimmest crescents, and solve for white pleated wings of moth, sprung whole from phases, just to die for light. You've packed up the not moon tonight, a hanging promise your light will come. Go barefoot in the drought-powdered dirt, press hard against the hole of cocoon. The strongest sit in the dust, unknowing. The strongest linger in the bind, wait for faintest sliver, emerge. So the epigraph for this next poem comes from Ezekiel. I will give you a new heart and place a new spirit within you, taking from your bodies your stony hearts and giving you natural hearts. This is the Elysia sea slug. Things go sideways. The body opens the wrong doors and lets in bad company, copepods that take over. Then we carry it, segments crippled with parasites, stony growth. I think you mean it when you say you'll give me a new heart. I see evidence in stars, in the sea slug that can detach its entire diseased body and crawl away on orange horned antenna. The head births a new form. Mangled sea stars and flatworms do this, but only the Elysia sea slug sprouts a heart from just a head. This is your prescription. You pry loose the cargo and craft fresh strands of light. When I unhook all the parts and struggle away, won't you come rebuild? Tear down the years the locusts have eaten. Let the heavy consignment fall. Regenerate a glistening wholeness from only one piece. Let that piece be you. So along with sea poems and space poems, this book has some land poems also, so I want to read just one of those to you, one that reminds us that when we feel vulnerable or beaten down by the world, our resilience does not depend on exterior toughness, but on what's beneath the surface. This is Resilience as Daffodil. Not aloe or jade or elephant bush, not thick skin of succulent, not yucca or enduring cactus, stoic digging root into rocky crag. The resilience I love inhabits neither winter nor spring, but grows in the curt ground prevailing between the tender shoot which spears callous earth, though barely dressed in soft greenness. The contradiction of gentle leaves unsheathing. No spike, no thorn, merely the battery of bulbs buried deep, tiny suns startling the snow. So I live in Los Angeles, and sometimes earthquakes come with the territory. I don't love that, but that happens. And there have been some recently, in fact, smaller ones. But this poem, you'll hear, was more than a small one, and it comes from a while back. This is between 50 and 51. The walls mimic grass cloth, an imagined savanna of cream and palest green, echoed in subtle stalks on carpet. The beveled mirror on back wall, the panel, usual, buttons 1 to 60. But then that's all what my mind reconstructs alone in the dark, in the panic and jangling heart rate, when the lights go out and the box rattles and bangs against the shaking sides of shaft, dangling on cords, on threads, dry metallic taste dumbing my tongue. The distance matters between you and me, between me and the ground, between terrifying plunges. The weight of the car crashes, cracks. The cacophony of shocked concrete heaves in my ears, screeches in my bones. My hands flail, grapple for anything. I should be on 51, walking to my beige office. The drumming deafens now, no doors in the dead darkness, and my brain is frozen between the useless emergency call button and the kind of prayer that is of the whole body, of clamor and catastrophe, of take me and make me, of chaos and clarity. My feet try to root into the pretend grasses, but I lurch and sway with the casket or chrysalis. So I mentioned there are 12 nebula poems in the book, and I wanted to read just one more of those. So all of these nebulae are so different. They all have different characteristics, and I found it fascinating to kind of research each of them and think about their characteristics and how it kind of spoke into the human condition. So this nebula, I'll read to you now. Keyhole nebula is actually a little dark nebula. It's the absence of stars in the shape of a keyhole. Keyhole nebula. Opening in the southern sky, my shard to your shard, my rift your inverse. Fitted, we were shattered just so darkly, a mirror. In mirror, I knew the hawk behind me because I saw the talons in you. Rush, flat flash across the pane, dusky figure 8 nebula cut, precise, coring of apple, a bashful unfastening. You were always the grooves in me, even before I knew you, turning, the embolting no one sees. So many keys I was given in the dream to bestow, to stow in the rusted screen door, warped side door, sticking steel lockbox inside. Inside, the clouds blot the shallow pool of window, just the littlest trick to tumble the cylinders, slightest click, twist of crisp light. So I'll read just one more poem from Butterfly Nebula, and then I thought it would be fun to read one final new poem. This last poem from Butterfly Nebula was sparked by the longest lunar eclipse in 500 years, which happened about 2 years ago. And the poem also borrows from the Greek myth of Persephone. This is Persephone at the turn. On the night of the longest lunar eclipse in 500 years, I was the bright skin of the moon passing into ruddy darkness with my handful of torn poppies. The vast slung undergarment of the abyss bled across my scuffed countenance, leaving only a sliver of my former self. Then I knew how help flies before us, tips the bowl of new life as we move, decants the courage of ripened fruit. What came before crosses into after, the shock of a new shape sliding over the brim. I have focused on the rusted shell when the trajectory is the pale slip of mist, a swelling trust in the reversal of night. This morning, the road eclipsed in dense marine layer, yellow painted lines and reflective markers emerged in the headlights just in time, gleaming constellations that spur me to keep driving over the miles, to lean into the silver thread widening before me, the knot of pomegranate slowly broken by light, sewing rubies into spring. So before I read this last poem, is been such a joy to be with all of you. Thank you. So I often write poems addressed to the divine, but I very, very rarely write a poem in the voice of the divine. So this is a new poem, and one of those extremely rare ones. It's Rainbow Hummingbird Premise. When I speak the word rainbow, you will be infused with radiating bands of light, with oranges, lemons, limes, a fiery sweetness which opens hidden segments to juice and pepper the tongue. The peels will unfasten you. When I speak rainbow, the iron sky will issue a crack and burst technicolor. You will be afraid to believe the sorrow has come to an end. It will terrify you that you may be wrong. You will ponder the ways you have been wrong before. But on my syllables, rain and bow, you will sigh. You will know that you have irrigated the land with a vast array of canals, one jeweled drop at a time, watering my purpose. You will bend, you will glow with roses and begonias, and my vowels will unshadow and spell you. When I speak the word hummingbird, you will buzz and lift the world by the delicate strands of your being. You will not understand the melting gates of your green fizzed glitter chest, the shock of red at your throat. You will open without realizing that I open you. I closed Zechariah for his doubt, stilled his tongue for the gestation of his son, which was the gestation of his wild, hammering hope. His mouth unbolted at the birth. You see my meaning. When I speak my premise, you will jolt with the promise now born. You will prickle with what has arrived. You will unfurl the humming word on my mark. Now, love, put on this kaleidoscopic shimmer and begin. Thank you. Okay. Hello again. So, questions. I'm happy to take any and all questions. Yes. So, to me, science is just sort of the underpinning of the created world. So I see it as our method of trying to delve into creation to, I think of it, this is Laura, I think of it as ways that we're scratching the surface of this incredible creation of God. So for me, it brings me closer to just awe and wonder when I engage with the creative world, even from the scientific perspective, from any observation of it. So as I look at the creative world and research it, that's what I'm feeling. I don't know if that answers your question. Yes, back there. So every poem is a little different process for me. And poems seem to actually have sometimes like a will of their own. So it's like a process of grappling with it. And also the original spark may be different. So I may have an idea, or or I may see or experience something that speaks to me. So the idea may come from my thoughts, but it also may come from the external world. But the process very frequently is I will just try to draft, sit down, free write, and see what comes. And I can usually go back and look through and see where the hot spots are, what I want to pull out and work with, and just go from there. Yeah. Yes, you. Sorry, what? So I started writing this right at the beginning of the pandemic when, as we all were, feeling very confined and isolated. So those wide open spaces and outer space just kind of appealed to my imagination. And I didn't intend to go down this nebulae road. What happened is Butterfly Nebula actually was the first of the poems I wrote because I was so attracted to this beautiful nebula with two arching nebular lobes, and it does look like a butterfly. And I enjoyed engaging so much in that, I started looking at them. And even the names of the nebulae are so fun, and they're all so different. I'll write one more. Well, I'll write another one. And it kind of went like that. Did you have yeah. Again, they're all so different. One in Litany of Lights that I didn't read just now, but I will read in the lecture. That is the longest I've ever taken, and it took me 2.5 years of going back and forth and around with that poem. But others, I've had the amazing experience of writing it, and it's almost exactly what it needs to be. Most of them are somewhere in between. So I would say I'm very blessed to have close poet friends that I kind of workshop poems with. And I typically am able to finish or get close to a poem being finished in a few weeks, but sometimes I may set it aside and come back to it months later just to make sure it feels right. And I may change, I may work with it again. Usually I have a sense if it's really, really finished. Yes. Yes, so I do. I love that, and they appear in both of these books actually. And sometimes they're a saint or some other figure. In Litany of Lights, we have Dorothy of Day. We have, even The Mother Gives Us is a poem, which is just sort of the feminine. But what I feel for a poem like Mary, Wife of Clopas, for example, Mary, Wife of Clopas is this figure in Scripture that we know almost nothing about. So she's referred to in that way. She appears in the Synoptic Gospels, but we don't know anything about her. So I just find that fascinating that women are there at the foot of the cross even. She's at the foot of the cross. So her identity in that poem is something I play with, like, who is she? What does Jesus do in drawing out that identity? Identity is something that comes up a lot with the female character poems that are in the book. So I find them inspiring. I find strength in a lot of these figures, or teaching things. Like in the St. Teresa's Pillow poem, that's a struggle to be drawn out of our comfort zone by God. And I'm using a couple of images from her life to kind of help navigate that. Yeah. Yes. Human technology and nature. So I don't really address so much human technology, but I'm using the results of human technology in some of these poems. Two of the book is divided, Butterfly Nebula is divided into 5 sections named for constellations. And two I chose are microscopium and telescopium. So those instruments that we use to explore the created world, I think are drawing us more and more deeply into the mystery of it. Because as much as we can know, there's something we don't know, that we get to that level and then we discover so much more we don't know. To me, it reflects the endless mystery of God, even as we're kind to sink into it and learn more about it. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Um, yeah, so I think that we're grounded in our reality. This is the world we live in. We live in worlds with freeways and university classrooms. And I feel it's so important, and I try to touch on this in my work. God meets us right here where we are, and I feel like that's really where we can resonate most and learn most and encounter the presence of God the most. I stay away from having a lot of that in my poems because I don't want it to be attached to particular times that might distract, because I want it to be open enough for the reader to enter that space. But I also feel it's important for us to feel grounded in the reality we live in. So that's where that comes from, if that answers your question. Okay. Thanks. So thank you for that question. We were actually talking, I did the podcast with Matthew Wickman this morning, and that's a question that came up there as well. And it was kind of a challenge I wanted to take these things that were just oversized, almost unimaginable celestial objects or crazy creatures as points of departures to kind of meditate on. But it was a challenge to build all the layers into the poems that I needed to not let that be the primary or only focus, but to kind of open space in the poem for the human condition, for the reader to enter in and kind of intersect with what I felt like I wanted the heartbeat of the poem to actually be and express. So it was different from poem to poem, but always a challenge. Any other questions? You up there? Mm-hmm. That's a good question. So and you referred to the poem "Longing is Dark Matter," which that was very choiceful in that poem because dark matter does that. It just kind of blows through, what we see in the universe. So I wanted the form of the poem to reflect that. And it does appear in some of the other poems in a similar kind of way. So that's the first part of your question. The second part, how do I want it to be read? Typically, with slight inflections or pauses through that, or breaths through those white spaces. Yes. Thank you. Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much for what you shared. That means a lot to me. I appreciate it. I always think about how a poem sounds, what information is coming through, and when the information is received, and the pace at which the information is received. So yes, I very much think about a listener and what they're experiencing and when. I'm grateful for what you said, because maybe it's working. That's important to me, actually. Yes. Any other questions? Yes? So I think being a writer is challenging in that you must build it into your day. If you're a serious writer, there's a tendency to let things that are on fire to come first, or, I mean, if things are really on fire, they need to come first, but to let things seep into your day, and then, there's not a whole lot of time left for your writing practice. So for me personally, the morning is the best time to do my first drafts. I can revise anytime during the day, but I'm freshest in the morning. So I try to build time in for new writing early in the morning. That's how I do it. Because there's always something clamoring to be done, always. Yeah. It's a good question. Any other questions? Thank you so much. I really enjoyed being here so much with you. Thank you.